Welcome to another edition of Year I Want to Talk About It, in which I talk about whatever I want. I do have some guests that will be coming on to the pod upcoming, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I found I really need this outlet and have also been doing a lot of remembering about initial childhood inclinations that I had but couldn't fully, articulate in real life, but, would do sit at the counter and have my little talk show going with like my little Play-Doh, making stuff or showing off what I made. And, here we are much later, still wanting to having the same inclination. And now, obviously, the outlets are plentiful. I came across this YouTuber I understood, and I really enjoy her channel on YouTube. I will link it below. But I was listening to one of hers today, a little shorter than some of her other chats, and she also has a podcast where she is she talk show host, kind of that same kind of idea. And she talks about, in this one I watched today, about how that's always been a dream for her, something she's really wanted to do, of being like an interviewer. And that felt deeply relatable. And also because like I'm just an interviewer in real life. Like I want to know everything, and I'm going to ask the questions, and and you put up some boundaries if you need to, like I absolutely honor a boundary, but like I want to ask questions, and not inappropriate questions, obviously, although I'm sure I've had my fair share of saying inappropriate shit. I know I have. Sometimes the brain runs off with the head, in the mouth. But yeah, I really enjoy her content and how she approaches talking through some of these kind of headier things. And this one in particular drew me because lots of stuff has been pinging for me around like 5D existence, right? And there's been a lot of astrology stuff. Specifically, I say astrology stuff, specifically Pam Gregory talking about like this shift in consciousness, kind of this opt-in or opt-out, and moving from 3D into 5D. And when I think about it more in terms of how that feels, kind of thinking about that in a more internal way, it feels very connected. It makes a lot of sense. Like, for example, like how reincarnation makes a lot of sense. Energy as matter, like doesn't just go away. It transmutes, it transforms. So like incarnation feels very spiral, like very circular, very like 'tis the cycle of life, right? Of energy. And oopsies, where have I gone? Oh, where have I gone? Get a little moon appearance. So I understood's message that I encountered today was talking about, it had a kind of a thing about, this kind of chart with, 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D. I think it went up to 7. And so that pinged me, of course. And because, yeah, I've been kind of like trying to figure out what that might mean for me, how, if that's something I want to start looking at and moving in a direction of, which, spoiler, I think I do. Again, because it's something that makes a lot of sense to me. If I'm really not interested in continuing to live in this like algorithmic overlord, racist, bigoted, homophobic, like capitalist, neo-Nazi clan environment, like it doesn't serve us. And I can't continue to do it. And especially because like I keep trying to do the thing and I keep ending up at these like dead ends that do not serve me again, where I can't get out of this like traction of existence. And in literally all facets of my life, from my home life, in which, you know, I'm having to potentially sue or pursue litigation. Like, I'm not that girl, but I'm also not interested in like stringing pennies together to survive and then also being like kicked in the teeth, you know, and calling it like food, right? Um, Again, in all aspects. And so seeing this, I understood video where it's talking about preparation. Like these events are preparation for being able to do the thing, call in the thing that you want. And it is, you know, this divine timing that like I enjoy the pursuit of work. I enjoy having something to do. That like yields a result, whether that's like connection or monetary or um, acknowledgement, or like I maker's gonna make. Like I can't so complete the circle eight, you know, and allow me to stay in that flow. Um, and So, and I think about this message that I received today from I Understood about being prepared. And then I also think of the Lion King Mufasa song, the hyenas. I was absolutely a hyena girl. I love those fucking hyenas so much. And obviously, Pumbaa was my boy because I was deeply, deeply obsessed with pigs. I had like a whole wall just filled with pig memorabilia. I like stopped eating bacon and hot dogs, and you know how your girl loves hot dogs. So it was a whole thing, all for the love of pigs, you know? My will is strong, strong. Um, and, you know, I find that because of that, and because of the way things have unfolded in my life, and being a creative person and always trying to pursue that in some avenue to make it my livelihood, because it's such a huge part of my existence and my personal expression, and also like my morality and my compass, you know, like all of these things. It's not like one without the other. And um that has constantly been a struggle of like ever feeling like I'm getting the value for what I'm doing, or the, you know, the trade-off of the output is coming back to me in some way that makes it possible to continue doing it. And so mostly I'm just always creating in kind of like a lack, or, you know, what I've really been trying to do more of, which is hard for me because everything has to have kind of a purpose or reason. Because that's how like I create. That's how I get passionate. That's how I resolve what's inside, whatever the thing is I'm trying to work out. The problem to solve, or, what problems am I solving with making this work? And that is like a Bernadette, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, that book, and then also the movie I watched yesterday with Cate Blanchett. And yeah, just like the tenacity to want to solve problems and make the world, and thusly our existence as, well, specifically neurodivergent, queer folk, marginalized folk, creative folk, make that experience not so. I would love to debunk once and fucking for all that starving artist trope. Like, we should not be living like this. That should never be the thing anymore. Like, artists make culture, artists make community and connection and music, and like all of these threads that tie us together and give our existence color and texture and sound and beauty and, thoughts. And like, it just can't be devalued anymore like it is, demeaned, even though, it's like demeaned, but also like at the level that it's exalted, it's just like so untouchable. And you're still not using the platform for furthering others' existence in that realm, or like it becomes a monarchy instead of like a diplomacy, or, I don't know. I did also see, this is going to be tangential, like a Communist Party poster, and it had kind of this white guy, bald, like kind of, it gave like a 20s 30s vibe, that like kind of illustrated profile of, like a communist, I guess, I don't know. Loved the graphic quality of it. It was definitely like catching. And then it got me thinking of like another thing that like has just always been in my desires, in my language, especially when it comes to me like feeling and talking about music, is the component that music has in supporting revolutions, and kind of being this like great unifier in a way to like physically mobilize people, and like, and then also the sound, like to be able to have that much sound, as in like they're marching and chanting or singing, and like giving language to the voices that feel unheard, and how important that is. And that's not like a magic that everyone wields. And I have actually never articulated it in this way or thought about it in this way ever before this moment happening right together. And so seeing that poster, and like also thinking about music in Music City, of like, how do you find your people? How are you distinctive enough? What is the way that you want to access your people? And it's like, you're not trying to just catch all the fish. You want certain fish. You want to attract certain fish in real life, in love life too, right? But that's another thread for another time. And so I was thinking about this poster and thinking about how, because it was, this white man ostensibly on the poster, that made me disinclined, even though communism as a concept, or like a group of people, might otherwise have been compelling for me. And I get that, they're relying on the kind of like classic iconography of it, which I'm here for. I get, but that doesn't give for me, like that gives for like some cis white het folks that like that's gonna really make them feel connected. Or I don't know. I'm just making a lot of wild assumptions. But I thought about that iconography and that being important. And then I thought about kind of this thing that always finds me again, that I'm always in various states of remembering this is the thing. This is one of the little magic seeds that I am here to like plant, foster, and grow into abundance. But being, at the point that I'm ready to do my music, that creating like a poster that is like for the resistance is part of that branding. And part of the net I'm using to try and catch the fish I want, right? Tangential. I know. So, and I'm going to loop back to I understood's thing, and this is all connected. It always connects eventually. And then that just reminded me of my whole like train thing and the train stuff coming up. My cousin sent me this after he saw an owl for the first time. And then also my bird that I like is my thing that I've been wanting to see. He had always been wanting to see an owl, and I've seen, I've been really honored to see not a lot, but a good amount of owls in my life. And he had never seen one, but had seen roseate spoonbills like, all the time. And I'm like, I just need to see this bird. And he sees it all the time. And so his bitch ass finally saw an owl, and then 2 roseate spoonbills also flew over. And I'm like, wow. And it was so funny, the timing, of course, because I had like literally just been thinking about him and thinking about, there's this thing that I've coined the Jersey lie. And it's where you will say the thing that you're being accused of doing, but in a tone that makes it seem like it's so ridiculous it couldn't possibly be true. But the Jersey lie is that it's actually the truth. And he is the one that like, in his youth used the Jersey lie, and like, and the way that he got to be telling the full truth and still not be in trouble was incredible. And I really respect that. And I think about that. And so, yeah, just, those funny little synchronicities that like, I'm always a sign girl. It always matters. And I think that's, for me, especially now looking back on maybe why that stuff is significant for me. Because it allows me to like, it's almost like calibration for my own inner compass of like validating my own intuition of being like, oh yeah, of course that all happened, and the timing is because like the thoughts were aligned, and it might not be any more significant than that, or but it's just like one of those things that it's like a little North Star moment where I'm just like checking in on my direction. Which way am I facing here? And as someone who is kind of always, it feels like, in a process of unpacking narcissism and how it has ran rampant in so many different aspects of my life, and then also remembering to trust myself and learning how to do that, and then couple that with just like the extreme grief of losing my baby and just the constant, like, relearning how to exist on top of, losing work and not having enough work and not being able to pay rent, and like all of these different outside factors that really can kind of derail that inner work or that inner sense of knowing. So having these kind of synchronistic moments feels really grounding and validating and like affirming of like, okay, like I'm not completely off the track here. And also, like, I can trust my inner knowing, and I don't need other people to tell me what it is anymore, or like create dissonance so that I can't decipher my own inner knowing from like what they're telling me it is. Wild. I'm going to circle back to the I understood about being prepared for these certain moments in our life and this trajectory. And like, she was talking about how, like fruit trees, sometimes they take 15 years, 20 years to ever bear fruit. And, that these things that I may want and like feel and see the end result of, there's still like, that doesn't just happen, and nor would you want it to just like immaculately happen. And so becoming prepared for that moment, and then also thinking about, like, I think there's a tangible preparation that like is helpful for me to start thinking about of like, oh yeah, like how do I get to this point when I'm over here? And I need to make like a plan, like a tangible plan. Okay, I want this like Nashville band. I need to put out a poster to find, to see what my net pulls up. And then go from there, right? Of like, you just have to start something. You have to move in that direction in some tangible way. But also that everything that has happened is also part of the preparation. And that without those series of things happening, like it's all in a service to this bigger picture, but it's going to take the time it takes to get there. And, I think about, like just basic work that doesn't, and that for me is bartending work. And the thing I've been kind of wrapping my head around is that I really enjoy the work. I enjoy the physicality of bartending. I enjoy the social interaction of it. I enjoy like the exchange of like, I'm making you a drink and you're giving me money and hopefully tipping me. And then there is a little bit of fallout in that if the bar is not busy enough and then people aren't tipping, and then that energy exchange gets so tenuous and hard to manage, and the unpredictability of that. And but I think the other side of all of that bag of marbles is that the difference of signing up to do that kind of work in that exchange and knowing the crapshoot of it, is being able to be working for a bar that is honest about the situation and holds their employees with integrity as well as their like bar, and it's maintained in a certain way, and there are like systems in place that are there for everyone to be successful, and then there's not like this bait and switch, or like this over idealized owner that like doesn't actually have any bandwidth or intentions of making things different, right? So, and I say all of this like seems very specific, but again, where it comes back to the preparation of like, I wouldn't know the things that I now need to look for when I'm trying to find this line of work if it hadn't been for experiencing all of the shitty things, right? And that's I'd rather know that than not know, and be able to make my choices accordingly, you know, and also to know to ask certain questions now. And so yeah, I'm going to share some kind of fun synchronistic news. Speaking of these little synchronicities, so like I'm a big fan of the show Nashville, and in the show they reference the Five Spot, and it's kind of an institution like venue here in East Nashville. And you know, and it's one of those things where I had never actually been, and then a Hinge friend invited me to this really cool show there. And then it so happened that an India Raimi, gothy tonk, if you like country music and you like it like feminist and a little gothy, like check her out. She's incredible. Really, like, she's like a showman. That was such a cool show. And I, again, with like the kismet, the synchronicity, like a series of things had to happen in order for that to happen, you know? And that also included like losing my job, you know, because then the pal who invited me was like, I got you. And just the care that showed for a new friendship was like, it felt really good, you know? It felt very soothing to like frayed ends of my soul. And then, so it was my first time going to the Five Spot because the show was at the Five Spot. And then a bartender from my first job in Nashville, the one that brought me to Nashville at the Bowery, he had worked there, and then he was the bartender that night, and he works one day a week. So again, like the amount of things that had to line up for this all to transpire. And so I was like, Ian, are you guys hiring here? I really loved the layout of the venue. It's got a great stage, like nothing gets bottlenecked. The bathrooms are a good size. They're clean. Like, you know, it's like, it's definitely a lived in bar, and I appreciate that. I like that. I don't want it pristine. Like, that's not at all. But after working at the Cobra, I'm like, I don't want to feel the bar as like a bartender, or, you know, once you see that, you can't unsee that shit. And like the amount of, I mean, yeah, I can't, that's not what I want. But I wouldn't have known that had I not experienced it, right? And so just, you know, there was all these things that kind of pinged for me, and that I was like, this is, like, I like what's happening here. I like the vibe. I like the energy of it. They had a black sound guy, which, like, you know, that's also one of my things. If you don't have people of color on your staff, then like we're probably not going to be a fit. And yeah, so all that to say, he was like, oh, we might have something opening up. Come by and, you know, chat with one of the owners on Monday. And so I popped in. We ended up, and just briefly, because I had to go do KJ at Lipstick. And, you know, it was like the convo flew just just really synced up, felt really easy, flow. And then went in today to like do a more kind of formally interview and get a little bit better lay of the land of like what they're going to actually need. Again, like the realistic, what they can offer, what is available. And I really appreciated like the candor and being able to be realistic and not optimistic about it. And so yeah, I'm gonna be, pick up bar back, fill in kind of bartendery. How they do the bar back bartender is also interesting. And I love a system. I love a system that works and is like designed for people within a setting to have a structure. Like, I love that shit, especially because like I'm so neurodivergent and in an unpredictable setting like a bar, it's nice to have these kind of tried and true structures in place, and people like the owners who are doing those things and know what the ins and outs of that looks like and have already kind of troubleshooted over a series of time, they've been preparing for it. They've been doing trial and error. Here's the real piece de resistance. So it's husband and wife owners, and Thursday they're doing their karaoke like kickoff, where what I came to find out today is one of the owners, Todd, he, Carafun, the like karaoke app, was like $300 a month plus like additional premium to pay stuff for songs that like people were just like, like you can just do this off of YouTube. You don't need to pay these like apps to do this. And like thrifty karaoke. And so he's like, I realized that was like not going to be it. And he like he did some coding and like a Google Drive and a QR code, and now like has it so that it'll like, you put in the song, and even if you don't know the artist, it'll like search it for you and give you like good results back that are accurate and for karaoke, and like culls from like certain like of the better YouTube karaoke pages. And I like the ways that I'm still like, oh my God, that is so cool. And like, yes, this is it exactly. Yes. Put me on an island with that kind of brain and that kind of problem solving. And like, that makes me feel, that's one of those things of like, that feels like my compass pointing north, like that feels like, and how weirdly specific of a thing that is to have figured out, and then for me to like find out what that is the day before it starts, and like how much of a fan, a karaoke like head I am. I'm just like, that can't be by accident, right? Like, again, with this stuff where I'm like, the things I end up knowing in happenstance are just like, it's too synchronistic to be by accident, And I'm here for that shit, Avi. And In Pursuit of Magic, right? I did find one of the photos I had taken when I lived in New York, and I'd been seeing the In Pursuit of Magic graffiti. And I had this whole thought, because many years later, talk about like randomly seeing the thing. Many years later, and this is my whole In Pursuit of Magic theory that I promptly debunked by Googling it, and finding out that it's actually this artist, Betty Kay, I think, which I had this whole theory that In Pursuit of Magic was like a graffiti that Dr. Roxane Gay, writer, had made, because in her kitchen this one time she did like a video on Instagram and a story where, she like showed her stovetop, something was cooking or whatever. And it had like this stencil, you could tell it was like spray painted silver, like a used stencil of In Pursuit of Magic. And so I was like, who else would have that if she's not the one who originated it? And so I thought I had this whole, like fan theory that, and then it, that it was Roxane Gay who had made these In Pursuit of Magic things. But alas, is not. And now I'm like, well, why does she have that though? But then I also found out that this artist who did those, she like sells the steel plates and that have been spray painted. So maybe that was just how she ended up with, like, she bought it, Things debunked. Well, dolls, I think that maybe wraps us for now. I think the takeaway here is, trusting your own intuition to get you where you need to go, and do your best to, tangibly prepare, but like know that it's all in, it's all in a progression. It's all in pursuit of like a bigger path, a bigger picture. And you're like on the path to connecting all of that, right? And wish me luck. I have a planning call with said lawyer. And here we go. All right. Until next time, dolls. Thank you for being here and sharing this space. If you want to chime in or have thoughts, questions, feels, whatever, please feel free to pop into those comments or slide in the DMs. I do want to circle back on a conversation about AI and specifically around music. So I will I've been, just feeling my way through that and doing more recon. And I think that's definitely a topic that there will be a part 2, and just continue kind of pulling at those threads and seeing what comes. In the meantime, dolls, don't let nobody shame you, and don't you shame yourself. Lots of love.